Muscular feared millionaire finds his black ex-wife at a restaurant with twins who look just like him. The glass of sweet tea slipped from her fingers, shattering against the floor in a crash that made every head turn. But Mason only saw her, fuller now, curves where sharp angles used to be, her natural hair in soft curls instead of the straightened style she'd worn during their marriage. Have you ever run into someone who completely changed your life? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. The most dangerous man in Wyoming just discovered he's a father. Have you ever walked into a room and your entire world shifted in 30 seconds? When everything you thought you knew about your life crumbled like dust in your hands. That's exactly what happened to Mason Voss on a humid Sunday afternoon in Atlanta, Georgia. Mason built an empire on control. Oil wells in Wyoming, tech companies in Austin, real estate from coast to coast. But two 4-year-old boys with his exact green eyes just shattered everything he thought he understood about power. What would you do if you found out someone hid your children for 4 years? If the woman you once loved and lost was sitting 30 feet away with sons who looked like carbon copies of your childhood photos? The restaurant buzzed with Sunday afternoon warmth. Sweet tea glasses sweating, cornbread crumbs scattered like memories across red checkered tablecloths. Mama Ruby's soul food had been feeding Atlanta families for 3 generations. The kind of place where strangers became friends over plates of fried chicken and mac and cheese. Then he walked in, and conversations died mid-sentence. Mason Voss didn't belong in this world of community and comfort. 6'3" of muscle and money, wearing a $1,000 suit like armor, tattoos peeking from his rolled sleeves telling stories of a rougher past. His reputation preceded him everywhere. The boy from Trailer Park, Wyoming, who built a fortune through sheer will and ruthless determination. But today, none of that mattered, because there, in a corner booth by the window, sat the woman who'd haunted his dreams for 4 years. Sienna Williams, or the woman he'd thought was Sienna Williams, laughing softly with 2 little boys who shared his stubborn jawline, his thick dark hair, his unmistakable eyes. The memory hit him like a physical blow. Their wedding day in Denver 7 years ago, her radiant smile as she promised forever, the way she'd whispered against his ear during their first dance, "I can't wait to have your baby someday." Someday had apparently come and gone without him. His chest tightened as he watched the smaller twin. God, they were identical. Reach across the table for his brother's role. The gesture was pure Mason at that age, greedy and unapologetic. The other boy, quieter, more careful, reminded him of his own cautious nature before the world taught him to take what he wanted. Sienna looked up then, following her son's gaze toward the entrance. When her eyes met his across the crowded restaurant, her face went white as winter. The glass of sweet tea slipped from her fingers, shattering against the floor in a crash that made every head turn. But Mason only saw her, fuller now, curves where sharp angles used to be, her natural hair in soft curls instead of the straightened styles she'd worn during their marriage. Motherhood had softened her edges, made her even more beautiful, and absolutely terrified. Have you ever run into someone who completely changed your life? Someone you never expected to see again? Tell me in the comments what that felt like. Because what happened next would change everything for 3 generations of families. She was already moving, gathering purse and boys with practiced efficiency, whispering urgent instructions. But before she could escape, the bolder twin looked directly at Mason with curious eyes that mirrored his own. "Mama," the little voice carried across the sudden quiet, innocent and devastating. "Who's that man? He looks just like me." She disappeared like smoke 4 years ago, taking his heart and apparently his bloodline with her. The Atlanta heat pressed down like judgment as they faced each other in the restaurant parking lot, for years of silence crackling between them like live wire. Customers streamed past, stealing glances at the obvious drama. But Mason's focus never wavered from the woman who destroyed and defined him. Sienna. Her name felt foreign on his tongue after years of forcing himself not to say it. "It's Sarah now." Her voice shook despite the defiant lift of her chin. Sarah Mitchell. Sarah Mitchell. Even her name was a lie. The boys pressed close to her sides, sensing danger they couldn't understand. The quiet one, Ethan, she called him inside, hid behind her legs. But the bold one, Eli, stared at Mason with open fascination. "Why did you run?" The question ripped from his throat before he could stop it. "After everything was cleared up, after my name was cleared, why didn't you come back?" Her laugh held no humor. "Come back to what, Mason? To the man who'd become a stranger? To the empire built on everyone else's destruction? I was proven innocent." His voice dropped to the dangerous tone that made boardrooms go silent. "The charges were false." Derek confessed. "You knew that." "I knew a lot of things." She fumbled for her car keys, hands trembling. "I knew you changed. I knew the man I married was gone. And I knew." She stopped, biting off words that could destroy them both. "You knew what, Sienna? That I was pregnant." The admission fell between them like a bomb. "I was pregnant when I left, and I knew you'd never forgive me for not believing in you when it mattered." The world tilted. For years of wondering, of searching, of blaming himself for driving her away, and she'd been carrying his children the entire time. "Sons," the word came out broken. "You had my sons, and you never told me. I protected them." Fire flashed in her dark eyes. "From the man you became, from the violence and the anger and the... I had every right to know." His shout made both boys flinch, and immediately he lowered his voice, hating himself for scaring them. "Those are my children, Sienna. My blood. You're what?" She stepped closer, fury overriding fear. "Your property? Your heirs? Your little carbon copies to mold into the next generation of Voss men. When someone hurts you deeply, do you have the right to keep their children away? Where's the line between protection and revenge? Share your thoughts below. Because this fight was about to reveal secrets that would change everything. You had no right to keep them from me." His voice stayed low now, deadly calm. "Whatever I became, whatever you thought I was, they deserve to know their father. I had every right to protect them from what you became." She clutched the car keys so tight her knuckles showed white. "The Mason I married was gentle, kind. He believed in second chances and helping people rise up instead of climbing over them. That Mason was weak." The words tasted like poison. "That Mason let people destroy his reputation, his business, his marriage. That Mason trusted the wrong people and lost everything that mattered. Including me?" The question hung in the humid air between them. "Including her. God help him, especially her." Before he could answer, Eli tugged on his mother's dress. "Mama, is that man her daddy? He has my eyes." Sienna's face crumpled for just a moment before she rebuilt her mask. "Get in the car, babies. Now." As she bundled the boys into car seats, Mason memorized every detail. Eli's cowlick that matched his own baby pictures. Ethan's serious expression that looked exactly like Mason at that age. The way they both had her smile, but his stubborn chin. His sons, for years old, and he'd missed everything. First steps, first words, birthdays, bedtime stories, stolen from him by the woman he'd loved more than his own life. The engine started, and panic shot through him. He couldn't lose them again. Not now. Not when he just found them. Sienna wait. But her car was already pulling away, Georgia license plate disappearing into Atlanta traffic. The plate that he noticed with the part of his brain that cataloged threats wasn't registered to Sienna Williams. It was registered to Sarah Mitchell. She was living under a fake name, hiding from something or someone. The question that would haunt him all night wasn't just about the children he'd missed or the woman who'd left him. It was about what could be so dangerous that Sienna Williams had erased herself completely, and whether she was protecting the boys from him or from something much worse. He'd found missing oil deposits, tracked down corporate thieves, but nothing prepared him for hunting the woman who stole his sons. The hotel suite overlooked downtown Atlanta's glittering skyline, but Mason saw only darkness beyond the windows. His laptop screen glowed with private investigator reports, financial records, a paper trail of a woman trying to disappear. Sarah Mitchell, 28 years old, culinary instructor at Atlanta Community College, single mother of twin boys, Eli and Ethan Mitchell. No father listed on birth certificates. clean credit, modest apartment in East Atlanta, no criminal record. A perfect fake identity. But Mason hadn't built a fortune by accepting surface truths. He learned to dig deeper, to question everything, to find the cracks where reality leaked through lies. 3 phone calls to his best investigators. 2 hours of computer searches. 1 hefty payment to a contact in the Georgia DMV. The real picture started to emerge. Sarah Mitchell's Social Security number belonged to a woman who died in a car accident 6 years ago. The apartment lease had been signed with cash deposits and fake references. Even the job at the community college. Mason's contact in HR revealed the truth with the right financial motivation. Someone had helped her disappear. Someone with resources, connections, and the skills to create airtight false identities. But who and why? Mason scrolled through photos his investigator had taken. Sienna, Sarah, walking the boys to daycare each morning at exactly 7:45, stopping at the grocery store every Wednesday after work, taking them to the park on Saturday afternoons, pushing them on swings with the same patient smile he remembered from their early marriage. She looked happy, content, like she'd built exactly the life she wanted. Without him, the thought burned through his chest like acid. She'd created this perfect little family, raised his sons, given them everything except their father. While he'd spent 4 years in boardrooms and oil fields, drowning in work to forget her touch, she'd been living a fairy tale with the children he didn't even know existed. His phone buzzed. A text from his lead investigator. Found something you need to see. Check your email. The attachment made his blood freeze. Bank records showing monthly deposits into Sarah Mitchell's account. Always the same amount, $3,000. Always from the same shell company, DK Holdings, LLC. Derek Kane. The name hit him like a physical blow. Derek Kane, his former business partner. Derek Kane, who'd fabricated the sexual assault charges that destroyed their marriage. Derek Kane, who'd confessed to his crimes in a desperate plea bargain, but escaped real consequences through expensive lawyers and technicalities. Derek Kane was funding Sienna's new life. Have you ever had to rebuild your life from scratch? Start over with a new identity, new friends, new dreams? Drop a fire emoji if you've been there, because what Mason discovered next would prove that sometimes the people trying to help you are actually controlling you. Mason's hands shook as he scrolled through 2 years of payments. Derek hadn't just helped Sienna disappear. He'd been financially supporting her and the boys. The apartment, the car, probably even the job. Derek Kane was playing puppet master with Mason's family. But why? What did Derek want with Sienna and the boys? The answer came in another email attachment. Recent photos of Sienna and the twins, taken with a telephoto lens from across the street. Professional surveillance photos showing their daily routines, the boys' school, their apartment building. Someone had been watching Mason's family for months. And it wasn't Mason. His phone rang. Unknown number, but Mason answered anyway. Hello, old friend. Derek's voice carried the same smug confidence that had once charmed investors and fooled juries. I heard you found our little family reunion touching. What do you want, Derek? What I've always wanted. What should have been mine from the beginning. Derek's laugh sent ice through Mason's veins. Did you really think she disappeared on her own? Poor little Sienna, pregnant and scared, needing a hero to save her from the big bad Mason boss. You son of a... Careful now. I'd hate for something to happen to those beautiful boys. They look so much like you, Mason. It would be tragic if they inherited your enemies along with your eyes. The line went dead. Mason stared at his phone, Derek's threat echoing in his mind. This wasn't about Sienna. It wasn't even about the boys. This was Derek's final revenge, taking away the family Mason had lost and making them his own. But Derek had made one crucial mistake. He'd threatened Mason's children, and there was nothing more dangerous than a father protecting his sons. The manila envelope slid under his hotel door at midnight contained photos of Sienna and the boys, but they weren't surveillance shots. These were intimate family moments. Bath time, bedtime stories, Sienna tucking the boys in, kissing their foreheads goodnight. Someone had been inside their apartment, in their home, in their bedroom. The note inside made his blood freeze. she's not the only one with secrets. The boys disappear tomorrow unless you walk away. This is your only warning. But as Mason studied the photos, one detail caught his attention. In the background of a kitchen shot, barely visible on the counter, sat a small stack of legal documents. Custody papers. Derek wasn't just watching Sienna and the boys. He was preparing to take them. And Mason had less than 24 hours to stop him. The man who destroyed their marriage was back. And this time he wanted more than Mason's reputation. He wanted his son's. The abandoned warehouse in industrial Atlanta reeked of rust and regret. Derek emerged from shadows like he belonged there, his once handsome face marked by years of cocaine and corporate crimes. The expensive suit couldn't hide the hollow cheeks, the too bright eyes, the desperate edge of a man whose empire was crumbling. You came alone. Smart. Derek's voice echoed in the empty space. Though I suppose you don't have much choice, do you? Not with so much at stake. Mason kept his distance, every instinct screaming danger. What's this about, Derek? Haven't you done enough damage? Damage? Derek laughed, the sound sharp and broken. I gave you everything, Mason. Success, power, respect. And how did you repay me? By taking the only woman I ever loved. Sienna was never yours. She should have been. Derek's mask slipped, revealing the obsession underneath. Do you know how long I waited? How many years I spent building the perfect life for her? But she was so focused on you, so blinded by whatever spell you cast. You mean love? Mason's voice stayed dangerously calm. The thing you've never understood? Derek's face twisted with rage. Love? You call it love when you turn her against me? When you poison her mind with lies about my character? I didn't have to poison anything. You did that yourself when you tried to assault her at the company Christmas party. The accusation hung between them like a loaded gun. Derek's jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. That was a misunderstanding. She was drunk, emotional about some fight you'd had. I was comforting her. You were groping her in the supply closet until she screamed loud enough to bring security running. Ancient history. Derek waved dismissively, but sweat beaded on his forehead. The important thing is what happens now. What happens to those beautiful boys if their father makes the wrong choice? Mason's blood turned to ice. You touch my sons. Your sons. Derek smiled coldly. Are you sure about that? After all, Sienna was quite upset after your little misunderstanding at the party. Quite vulnerable. Who's to say what happened during those long, emotional conversations we had afterward? The implication hit Mason like a physical blow. You're lying. Am I? DNA tests can be so unreliable, especially when the samples get contaminated, when the lab results get lost, when new evidence surfaces suggesting the real father might be someone else entirely. Have you ever discovered someone was manipulating your life from behind the scenes? Someone you trusted was actually controlling you? Share your experience below, because what Derek revealed next would change everything about Sienna's escape. She thinks she's independent. Derek pulled out his phone, scrolling through banking records. Doesn't know I own her landlord, her boss, even her babysitter. Every job she's gotten, every apartment she's rented, every friend she's made. All arranged through my shell companies. Mason's stomach dropped. You've been controlling her entire life. I've been protecting her. From you. From the world. From the consequences of her poor choices. Derek's voice took on the tone of a man explaining something obvious to a child. Do you think a woman like Sienna could build a new life from nothing? A black single mother with no college degree, no family support, no money? The world would have eaten her alive. So you kept her as your pet. I kept her safe. Derek's composure cracked. I gave her everything she needed to survive. A home for the boys, a job that didn't require background checks, childcare she could afford. All I asked for in return was patience. Patience for what? Derek's smile turned predatory. For you to self-destruct. For the grief and guilt to consume you. For her to realize that the gentle, loving father she remembers doesn't exist anymore. He gestured toward Mason's clenched fists, his rigid posture. Look at yourself, Mason. Look at what you've become. Do you think she wants that rage around her children? I never hurt her. Never hurt anyone who didn't deserve it. Didn't you? What about Marcus Webb? The journalist who investigated your business practices? Mason's jaw tightened. Marcus Webb had dug too deep into Mason's methods, threatened to expose deals that skirted legal boundaries. When Webb's investigation stalled due to suddenly uncooperative sources and missing documentation, everyone knew Mason had made the problem disappear. Webb was spreading lies. Was he? Or was he just asking uncomfortable questions about how you really built your empire? Derek circled closer, sensing weakness. How many people have you destroyed, Mason? How many careers have you ended? How many families have you torn apart in your quest for power? That's business. That's who you are now. A man who solves problems through intimidation and violence. A man who takes what he wants and destroys anything in his way. Derek stopped just out of arm's reach. Is that really the father you want those boys to know? The words hit their target. Mason had become everything he'd once despised. Ruthless, cold, willing to crush anyone who threatened his interests. The gentleman Sienna had married was buried under years of betrayal and rage. But those boys were his sons. His blood, his chance at redemption. What do you want? Derek's smile widened. Simple. Walk away. Let me be the father they need. Let Sienna build the life she deserves with someone who can give her stability, security, love without violence. And if I refuse? Derek pulled out a thick manila folder. Custody petition already filed. Allegations of domestic violence, substance abuse, criminal associations. Character witnesses prepared to testify about your volatile temper and dangerous lifestyle. He tossed the folder at Mason's feet. I have video of you threatening witnesses, audio recordings of you discussing illegal business practices, financial records showing payments to less than savory associates. Mason stared at the papers scattered on the concrete floor. Years of careful reputation management, destroyed in a single legal filing. She'll never believe your lies. She doesn't have to believe them. The judge will. Derek checked his expensive watch. You have 24 hours to make your choice. Walk away quietly, or watch me take everything you care about through courts. And Mason, his voice dropped to a whisper, I've been patient for 4 years. My patience is running out. As Derek disappeared back into the shadows, his final words echoed in the empty warehouse. Choose carefully. Her safety depends on your decision. And the boys? Well, accidents happen to children every day. Tragic, really, when they lose the only father they've ever known. Mason's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, a photo of Eli and Ethan at their daycare playground, circled in red ink. The message read, choose carefully. Her safety for their silence. You have 24 hours. But the most terrifying part wasn't the threat. It was realizing Derek had just declared war on the only family Mason had ever loved. And this time, Derek wasn't playing by any rules at all. She thought she was protecting her sons by running from love. She was actually running straight into danger. The playground echoed with children's laughter, but tension stretched between Mason and Sienna like a tightrope as Eli and Ethan played on swings nearby, unaware their world was about to explode. Mason had found her here through the surveillance photos Derek's people had taken. Every Tuesday at 4 p.m., she brought the boys to Memorial Park after her classes ended. Routine made her predictable. Predictable made her vulnerable. And Derek knew all her routines. You need to listen to me, Mason said, keeping his voice low as parents pushed strollers past them. You and the boys are in danger. Sienna's laugh held no humor. The only danger here is you. Following us, stalking us. Derek Kane is funding your life. The words stopped her cold. Every dollar in your account, every bill that gets paid, every job you've gotten. Derek arranged it all. Her face went pale. That's impossible. Sarah Mitchell's social security number belongs to a dead woman. Your apartment lease was signed with fake references. Your job at the community college exists because Derek owns the company that handles their staffing contracts. Mason pulled out the banking records, showing her the monthly deposits. $3,000 every month for 2 years. DK Holdings. She stared at the papers like they were poisonous snakes. No, I found that apartment myself. I interviewed for that job. You interviewed with people Derek paid to hire you. You signed a lease with a landlord Derek controls. He's been pulling strings from the beginning, Sienna. You never escaped. You just moved into a prettier cage. The swings creaked as Eli jumped off mid-flight, running toward them with dirt-stained knees and his father's reckless grin. Mama, did you see how high I went? I touched the clouds. I saw, baby. Sienna's voice shook as she brushed dirt from his shirt. Go play with your brother, okay? Mama needs to talk to the grown-up. When someone from your past tries to warn you about danger, do you listen? Or do old wounds make you deaf to truth? Tell me what you do in the comments, because what Mason revealed next would shatter everything Sienna believed about her freedom. Eli looked between them with 4-year-old intuition that sensed secrets. Are you my daddy? You look like me and Ethan. The innocent question hit both adults like a physical blow. Sienna's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. Mason knelt to Eli's level, studying the face that was a perfect mirror of his own childhood. What do you think? He asked gently. I think yes. Eli no de seriously. But Mama says daddies sometimes go away and can't come back. Did you go away? Mason looked up at Sienna, seeing his own pain reflected in her dark eyes. Yeah, buddy, I went away, but I'm back now. Are you going to stay this time? The question hung in the afternoon air, like a promise neither adult knew how to make. Before Mason could answer, Sienna stood abruptly. Eli, go get your brother. We're leaving. But Mama... Now. The authority in her voice sent Eli running back to the swings. But Mason caught her arm as she started to follow. He threatened them. Sienna, Derek threatened our sons. She spun to face him, fury and fear warring in her expression. Our sons? Now they're ours? For years too late, Mason. For years of birthdays and scraped knees and nightmares and doctor visits. I didn't know. The admission ripped from his throat. Do you think I would have stayed away if I'd known? Do you think there's anything in this world that could have kept me from them if I'd known they existed? You knew I was hurting when I left. You knew I was broken and scared and... I knew you didn't believe in me when it mattered most. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I knew you looked at me and saw a monster instead of the man who loved you more than his own life. Tears finally spilled down her cheeks. You changed, Mason. After the accusations, after the investigation, you became someone I didn't recognize. Someone who solved problems with threats and violence. And someone who had to become harder to survive. He stepped closer, close enough to smell her familiar perfume, to see the gold flecks in her brown eyes. But I never stopped loving you. Never stopped hoping you'd come home. This is my home now. She gestured toward the playground where Eli was helping Ethan down from the monkey bars. These boys, this life, it's all I have. It's all built on Derek's money, Derek's control, Derek's obsession with you. Mason pulled out his phone, showing her the surveillance photos. He's been watching you, Sienna, inside your apartment, photographing the boys sleeping. She staggered backward, the photos hitting her like physical blows. Oh God, no, there's more. Mason hated himself for what he had to tell her next. He's filed for custody, claims I'm unfit, that you're unstable. He has witnesses prepared to testify, evidence of my business practices. He can't take them. He's not their father. He doesn't have to be. He just has to prove I'm dangerous and you're incapable of protecting them. Mason's voice turned rough with emotion. And given my reputation, given the way I've lived these past 4 years, he might succeed. Sienna watched their sons playing, oblivious to the adult drama surrounding them. Eli was spinning Ethan on the tire swing, both boys giggling as they spun faster and faster. What does he want? Me to disappear, to walk away and let him play house with my family. And if you don't, Mason met her eyes, letting her see the truth. He'll destroy us all to get what he wants. You, me, the boys, were just pieces on his chessboard. The wind carried the sound of children laughing, parents calling, the ordinary symphony of family life that Derek threatened to shatter. Sienna wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking fragile despite her fierce maternal strength. I don't care if you hate me, Mason's voice broke, but don't let your hate get our sons killed. Our sons? She whispered. Now they're ours? Before he could answer, Eli came running back, followed more slowly by cautious Ethan. Mama, there's a man by the fence taking pictures. He said he's making a movie about kids playing. Mason's blood turned to ice. Across the playground, partially hidden by trees, a figure with a telephoto lens focused on their family reunion. "Get the boys," Mason ordered, his voice sharp with command. "Now!" But as they gathered Eli and Ethan, herding them toward the parking lot with forced casualness, the black sedan parked across the street started its engine. Derek wasn't just watching anymore. He was documenting, building a case that would give him legal access to the boys and permanent power over Sienna. And Mason realized with growing horror that every moment they spent together, every sign of connection between them, was another weapon in Derek's arsenal. The trap was closing, and they might already be too late to escape. As they reached Sienna's car, she turned to Mason with desperate eyes. If he takes them, he won't. Mason's promise carried the weight of blood and oath. "Whatever it costs, whatever I have to do, he won't take our sons." For the first time in 4 years, Sienna didn't correct him when he said our. But as her car pulled away with his children inside, Mason noticed the black sedan following at a discreet distance. Derek's patience, as promised, was running out, and the real war was just beginning. The man she thought was her enemy became her only ally when she discovered her entire life in Atlanta was a lie. The eviction notice fluttered to the apartment floor like a death sentence. Behind it, legal documents, foreclosure warnings, termination letters. Derek's trap closing with surgical precision. Sienna stared at the papers scattered around her feet, her world crumbling in real time. 30 days to vacate. Immediate termination from her teaching position. Daycare services suspended due to incomplete background verification. Everything gone in a single morning. "Mama, why are you crying?" Ethan's small hand tugged at her shirt. The boys had been playing with blocks in the living room while she sorted mail, unaware their security was dissolving like sugar in rain. "I'm not crying, baby." She wiped her cheeks quickly. "Mama's just thinking." But she was crying. For the first time since arriving in Atlanta, real tears of hopelessness and rage. Because she finally understood what Mason had tried to tell her yesterday. Derek hadn't saved her. He'd imprisoned her in a cage made of fake kindness and false independence. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Pack light. You have 2 hours before the landlord changes the locks." 2 hours. 4 years of building a life, reduced to 2 hours of packing. Another text. "The storage unit on Peachtree is paid through next month. Unit 247. Key is taped under the dumpster." Derek, still pulling strings even as he destroyed her. Still playing puppet master with her desperation. Have you ever discovered someone was manipulating your life from behind the scenes? Someone you trusted was actually controlling you? Share your experience below, because what happened next would force Sienna to choose between pride and survival. The knock on her door came exactly 90 minutes later. She expected Derek, or his lawyers, or maybe the landlord with his fake sympathy and real cruelty. Instead, Mason filled her doorway like salvation in a $1,000 suit. "I heard," he said simply. "Pack the boys' things. You're coming with me. I don't need your charity." The words came automatically, for years of fierce independence rebelling against accepting help. "This isn't charity." His voice stayed gentle despite the urgency. "This is family. Family." The word hit her like a physical blow, because standing there with suitcases scattered around her feet and eviction papers in her hand, she realized how desperately she'd missed having someone to lean on. "The boys are my sons too." He stepped inside, immediately moving toward their bedroom. Where are their clothes? Favorite toys? What do they need to feel safe? The efficiency of his movements, the way he understood without being told that children needed familiarity during chaos. It reminded her of the man she'd married. The man who'd held her through nightmares and made her laugh during thunderstorms. Mason. His name felt foreign after years of not saying it. "Why are you doing this?" He stopped packing Eli's shirts, meeting her eyes across the small bedroom. "Because Derek was right about one thing. I did become someone you didn't recognize. Someone harder, colder, more willing to hurt people to get what I wanted." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "But those boys in there, they're my chance to remember who I used to be. Who I want to be again. The honesty in his admission broke something loose in her chest. I was scared, she whispered. When everything happened with the accusations, the investigation, I was so scared you'd become like the men who hurt my mother. Men who blamed everyone else for their problems. I did become that man. The confession came rough with shame. For a while. But seeing them yesterday, seeing you, he moved closer, close enough that she could smell his familiar cologne. I don't want to be that man anymore. Before she could respond, Eli bounded into the room with his characteristic energy. Are we going on an adventure? Mama said we might go somewhere new. The biggest adventure, Mason promised, kneeling to Eli's level. Would you like to see horses? Real ones. Real horses. Ethan appeared in the doorway, quiet curiosity overcoming his usual shyness. Like in the movies? Better than the movies. These horses live on a ranch with lots of space to run and play. Mason's eyes found Sienna's over the boys' heads. Would you like that? All of us together. The words carried weight beyond their surface meaning. All of us together. Not just geography, but family. Not just safety, but healing. Yes. Eli jumped up and down. Can we ride them? Can we name them? We'll see, Sienna said automatically, but her heart was already racing ahead to possibilities she'd trained herself not to want. The packing took less than an hour. 4 years of life reduced to 3 suitcases and 2 boxes of toys. As they loaded everything into Mason's rental car, Sienna felt the weight of starting over again. But this time, she wasn't running alone. Where exactly are we going? She asked as Mason secured the boys' car seats with practiced efficiency that surprised her. Home, he said simply. Wyoming. My ranch. Wyoming. 1,000 miles from everything she'd built, everything she'd known. But also 1,000 miles from Derek's surveillance and legal threats and the suffocating web of control he'd built around her life. As they pulled away from the apartment complex, Eli pressed his face to the window. Bye-bye, old house. Hello, adventure. In the rearview mirror, Sienna watched her life in Atlanta disappear. The community college where she taught cooking classes to single mothers. The park where she pushed the boys on swings every Tuesday. The grocery store where the cashier knew their names and always saved them the good peaches. All of it built on Derek's money. All of it contaminated by his obsession. Regrets? Mason asked softly, following her gaze in the mirror. No, she said, and realized she meant it. No regrets. Because for the first time in 4 years, she was making a choice that was truly hers. Not Derek's manipulation disguised as opportunity. Not desperation masquerading as independence. Her choice. Her family. Her chance at something real. The highway stretched ahead toward Wyoming, toward a future none of them could predict. But in the back seat, Eli was already asleep against Ethan's shoulder, and Ethan was holding his brother's hand the way they'd done since birth. Her boys. Mason's boys. Their boys. Maybe, just maybe they could build something worth keeping this time. When rich men fight over children, the courthouse becomes a battlefield and the truth becomes a casualty. The law office gleamed with mahogany and intimidation. Contracts and custody documents spread across conference tables like weapons of war. Outside, Atlanta traffic hummed with ordinary life, while inside, extraordinary stakes hung in the balance. Mason's lawyer, Elizabeth Crawford, had flown in from Denver, the best family attorney money could buy, with a track record of winning impossible cases. Across from them sat Derek's legal team. 3 lawyers in matching suits who looked like they'd stepped out of corporate nightmare. Mr. Kane is prepared to offer a generous settlement. The lead attorney began, his voice smooth as oil. Full custody of the minor children, with supervised visitation rights for Mr. Voss. Mrs. Williams would receive adequate support to rebuild her life. No, Sienna's voice cut through the lawyer's pitch like a blade. My sons are not for sale. She sat between Mason and Elizabeth, wearing her best dress and all the courage she could gather. The boys were safe at Mason's hotel with a trusted babysitter, but their absence felt like missing limbs. Mrs. Williams, Derek's lawyer, continued with patronizing patience. You must consider what's best for the children. Mr. Kane has provided stable financial support for 2 years. He's demonstrated commitment to their welfare, by stalking them. Mason's voice carried deadly calm. By manipulating every aspect of their lives. By threatening their safety. Mr. Voss, your own history raises serious concerns about the children's welfare. The second lawyer pulled out a thick folder. Multiple reports of violent confrontations with business associates, questionable financial dealings, a pattern of intimidation, and allegations. Elizabeth interrupted smoothly. Not convictions, and I'd be careful about throwing stones from that particular glass house. She slid her own folder across the polished table. Financial records showing Mr. Kane's embezzlement from 3 separate companies. Witness statements regarding his inappropriate behavior toward female employees. And most interesting, hospital records from 4 years ago showing injuries consistent with attempted sexual assault. Derek's lawyers exchanged glances. They'd come prepared for a fight about Mason's reputation, not Derek's criminal behavior. Have you ever had to fight for your family in court? When a legal system feels rigged against you, how do you find strength to keep fighting? Share your story below, because this battle was about to reveal secrets that could destroy them all. Mr. Kane's past difficulties are irrelevant to this proceeding, the lead lawyer said, but his confidence had slipped. This is about the best interests of my sons. Sienna stood up, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. Not Mr. Kane's obsession, not Mr. Voss's guilt. My sons, who need their mother and their father, not some stranger who thinks he can buy his way into our family. Sienna, Mrs. Williams, please sit down. Derek spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the same false warmth she remembered from their early interactions. I understand you're emotional, but don't. The single word cracked like a whip. Don't call me emotional for protecting my children. Don't minimize my fears because they're inconvenient for your fantasy. Derek's mask slipped slightly, revealing the controlling man underneath. I've given you everything. A home, a job, security for the boys. You gave me a cage. Sienna's voice rose, for years of suppressed rage finally finding voice. A beautiful, comfortable cage where you controlled every door, every window, every breath I took. I protected you. You stalked me. You photographed my children sleeping. You built a web of lies and called it love. She leaned forward, meeting his eyes directly. That's not protection, Derek. That's possession. The room fell silent except for the scratch of court reporters' pens and the distant hum of Atlanta traffic outside. Mason reached for Sienna's hand, offering support without taking over her moment. The touch sent warmth through her, reminding her she wasn't fighting alone anymore. Mr. Kane, Elizabeth's voice cut through the tension. My client has a counter-proposal. Drop your custody petition, cease all contact with Mrs. Williams and the children, and we won't file criminal charges for stalking, harassment, and financial manipulation. Criminal charges? Derek's composure cracked further. You can't prove. Video surveillance from the boys' daycare showing you photographing them without permission. Financial records proving you created the false identity Mrs. Williams has been living under. Witness testimony about your inappropriate behavior. Elizabeth smiled with predatory grace. Oh, we can prove quite a lot. Derek's lawyers huddled in whispered conference while the minutes stretched like hours. Finally, the lead attorney cleared his throat. My client requires time to consider this proposal. 24 hours, Elizabeth said crisply. After that, we file charges and seek a restraining order. As the meeting broke up, Derek caught Sienna's arm as she passed his chair. His grip was gentle, but his eyes held barely contained desperation. This isn't over, he whispered, too low for anyone else to hear. If I can't have you legally, there are other ways. Remember that. Mason moved instantly, his hand closing over Derek's wrist with enough pressure to make the other man wince. Touch her again. Mason's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. And you'll discover exactly how violent I can be when someone threatens my family. Derek released Sienna's arm, but his smile promised this was far from over. Outside the law office, Atlanta, heat pressed down like judgment as they waited for the valet to bring Mason's car. Sienna's hands shook as adrenaline faded, leaving exhaustion in its wake. "You were amazing in there," Mason said softly. "Fierce, strong, everything those boys need their mother to be." I was terrified. The admission came easier than expected, but I kept thinking about Eli and Ethan, about the life we could have without Derek's shadow over everything. "We'll have that life." Mason's promise carried the weight of oath. "Whatever it takes." The car arrived, and as they drove back toward the hotel where their sons waited, Sienna felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not the desperate hope of survival, but the warm hope of possibility. Maybe they really could build something worth keeping. But in the rearview mirror, a black sedan followed at a careful distance, and Derek's final words echoed in her mind. There are other ways. The legal battle might be ending, but the real war was just beginning. She walked into that courtroom alone, facing the man who destroyed her marriage and threatened her children, with nothing but truth as her weapon. The family courtroom felt more like a tribunal. Harsh lights overhead as Sienna sat alone at the defendant's table, facing a wall of expensive suits and briefcases while her baby's futures hung in the balance. Mason was in county lockup, arrested 12 hours earlier on charges that materialized like magic. Assault, threatening a public official, violation of a restraining order she'd never heard of. Derek's final legal gambit, designed to leave her defenseless when it mattered most. Mrs. Williams. Judge Patricia Hendricks called the hearing to order with brisk efficiency. "I understand you'll be representing yourself today?" "Yes, Your Honor." Sienna's voice stayed steady despite the terror crawling up her throat. "I couldn't afford an attorney on such short notice." Across the courtroom, Derek sat with his legal team like a spider in the center of his web. He dressed for maximum sympathy. Conservative suit, church-appropriate tie, the picture of responsible stability. But Sienna caught the satisfied gleam in his eyes when he looked at Mason's empty chair. "Mr. Kane," the judge continued, "please present your petition." Derek's lead attorney stood with theatrical gravity. "Your Honor, Mr. Kane seeks emergency custody of minor children Eli and Ethan Mitchell, currently in the care of their unstable mother and her violent boyfriend." "Husband," Sienna interrupted, then immediately regretted speaking out of turn. "Mrs. Williams," Judge Hendricks warned, "you'll have your turn to speak." "As I was saying," the lawyer continued smoothly, "Mr. Kane has provided consistent financial and emotional support for these children for 2 years. He's demonstrated commitment to their welfare, while their mother has shown questionable judgment in her choice of romantic partners." The presentation continued with surgical precision. Bank records showing Derek's support payments. Character witnesses describing his community involvement. Photos of the boys looking happy and healthy during supervised visits Sienna had never agreed to. When had those photos been taken? How long had Derek been positioning himself as a father figure while she thought she was protecting her sons from exactly this scenario? "Mrs. Williams," Judge Hendricks turned to her when Derek's team finished. "Your response." Sienna stood on shaking legs, acutely aware that every word she spoke could determine whether she'd tuck her boys in a bed tonight or watch strangers take them away. When you're fighting alone for what matters most, where do you find courage? Have you ever had to be stronger than you thought possible? Drop a arm emoji if you've been there, because what Sienna said next would change everything. "Your Honor, Mr. Kane isn't seeking custody because he loves these children. He's seeking custody because he can't accept that I chose someone else." Her voice grew stronger with each word. "For 4 years, he's controlled every aspect of our lives. Our apartment, my job, even our friendships, all funded and arranged by him without my knowledge." She pulled out the financial records Mason had given her, the evidence of Derek's manipulation. "He created a false identity for me, Sarah Mitchell, when I was at my most vulnerable. He isolated me from any support system that wasn't under his control. And when I finally found happiness with my children's father, he decided to take them away rather than lose his power over me." "Mrs. Williams," Derek's lawyer interrupted, "these are serious allegations without evidence." "I have evidence." Sienna's voice cut through his objection. Banking records showing payments from shell companies Mr. Kane controls. Lease agreements signed with fake references. Employment contract arranged through companies he owns. She'd spent the night after Mason's arrest going through every document, every contract, every piece of paper that defined her life in Atlanta. The pattern was unmistakable once she knew what to look for. More importantly, Your Honor, I have the truth. Mr. Kane isn't fighting for these children because he's their father figure. He's fighting because he can't stand losing control of me. Judge Hendricks studied the documents Sienna had submitted, her expression unreadable. Mr. Kane, how do you respond to these allegations? Derek stood with practiced humility. Your Honor, I helped Mrs. Williams when she was desperate and alone. I provided stability for her children when their biological father was absent. If that assistance came with conditions designed to ensure the children's safety, I make no apologies. What conditions? The judge asked sharply. Derek's composure flickered. Standard oversight. Making sure the boys were in appropriate child care. That Mrs. Williams maintained steady employment. That she lived where you wanted her to live, worked where you wanted her to work, socialized with people you approved of. Sienna's interruption earned another warning look from the judge, but she pressed on. That's not assistance, Your Honor. That's control. The courtroom fell silent except for the scratch of the reporter's keys and the whisper of air conditioning. Judge Hendricks reviewed the documents again, her frown deepening. Mrs. Williams, where are the children now? Safe, with trusted childcare, while I'm here fighting for the right to remain their mother. And Mr. Voss? Their alleged biological father. Sienna's heart clenched. In jail on charges that appeared 12 hours before this hearing. Charges filed by someone who wanted to ensure he couldn't be here to support his sons. Derek's lawyer shot to his feet. Objection, Your Honor. Mrs. Williams is implying. I'm not implying anything, Sienna said firmly. I'm stating fact. Mr. Kane has orchestrated this entire situation to isolate me and take my children. And if you give him custody, those boys will disappear into his web of control, just like I did. Judge Hendricks set down the documents, her decision weighing heavy in the silent courtroom. Mr. Kane, I'm deeply troubled by the pattern of control described here. While your financial support is commendable, the circumstances raise serious concerns about your motivations. Derek's confident mask finally cracked. Your Honor, those children need stability. They need their mother. The judge's voice carried final authority. Mrs. Williams, custody remains with you pending a full investigation into Mr. Kane's activities. However, I'm ordering supervised visitation only and requiring both you and Mr. Voss to undergo psychological evaluation before any permanent custody arrangements are finalized. Victory and relief flooded through Sienna like warm honey. She'd won. Her boys were safe. But as Derek's lawyer escorted him from the courtroom, Derek's whispered words carried deadly promise. You think this is over? If I can't have them legally, there are other ways. The bailiff escorted him out, but his eyes promised this war was far from finished. Outside the courthouse, Sienna collapsed onto the steps, adrenaline and exhaustion warring in her system. She fought the most important battle of her life and won. But Derek's final threat echoed in her mind as she waited for news of Mason's release. Legal custody was just paper. Real safety would require much more than a judge's ruling. And Derek had just declared he was done playing by legal rules. Winning in court felt like victory until she realized Derek's most dangerous move was still coming. The county jail smelled like disinfectant and desperation. But Mason had never been happier to breathe recycled air. 26 hours behind bars on fabricated charges. 26 hours of helpless rage while his family fought alone. But the charges were dropped now, Derek's legal manipulation exposed. Sienna waited in the visitor parking lot, leaning against his rental car with exhaustion written in every line of her body. But when she saw him walking toward her, relief transformed her face into something radiant. How did it go? He asked, though her presence here told him everything he needed to know. We won. The words came out rough with emotion. Custody stays with me. Derek's petition was denied. Mason pulled her into his arms without thinking. For years of separation forgotten in the desperate need to hold her, to confirm they were both real and safe and whole. She melted against him for a moment before pulling back, old walls reasserting themselves. The boys, safe, at the hotel with Mrs. Patterson. Sienna managed a tired smile. They've been asking for their daddy every 5 minutes since yesterday. Their daddy. The words hit him like a physical blow of joy and terror combined. He was a father. These weren't abstract concepts anymore. Somewhere in Atlanta, 2 4-year-old boys were waiting for him to come home. The drive to the hotel passed in comfortable silence, both of them processing the magnitude of what had happened. Legal victory was just the beginning. Now came the harder part, actually building a family from the broken pieces of their past. Mason. Sienna's voice was soft as they pulled into the hotel parking lot. What Derek said in court about there being other ways. I know. His jaw tightened. We're not staying in Atlanta another night. I've already arranged for a private jet to Wyoming. We leave in 2 hours. She nodded, understanding without argument that distance was their best protection now. Derek had lost the legal battle, but men like him didn't accept defeat. They escalated. The hotel room erupted in chaos when Mason walked through the door. Eli launched himself across the room with reckless 4-year-old abandon, while Ethan hung back with careful assessment before deciding the hug was worth the risk. Daddy, you're back. Eli's arms wrapped around Mason's neck with desperate strength. Mama said you had to go help other people, but I wanted you to stay here with us. I'm here now, Mason promised, his voice rough with emotion as both boys climbed over him like puppies. And I'm not going anywhere without you two again. Have you ever found a place that felt like home immediately? Where your soul just said, yes, this is it? Share that feeling with me in the comments, because the ranch in Wyoming was about to become their sanctuary. The flight to Wyoming passed in a blur of excitement and exhaustion. The boys pressed their faces to the windows, marveling at clouds and farmland and mountains that grew larger as they flew west. Sienna dozed against Mason's shoulder, the stress of recent days finally catching up with her. For the first time in 4 years, Mason allowed himself to hope. Real hope, not the desperate kind that sustains you through crisis, but the warm kind that builds futures. The ranch spread below them as they circled for landing. Golden grassland rolling toward mountains that scraped heaven, cattle scattered like toys across pastures that stretched beyond the horizon. Home! The word resonated in Mason's chest as he watched Sienna's face transform with wonder. It's so big, she whispered. So beautiful. Daddy, do you own all of this? Eli pressed against the window, eyes wide with 4-year-old awe. We own all of this, Mason corrected gently. This is our home now. Our home. The words felt foreign and perfect at the same time. The ranch house sprawled across a rise overlooking the valley, built from logs and local stone to blend with the landscape. Mason's housekeeper, Rosa, had prepared everything. Bedrooms for the boys filled with toys and books, fresh flowers in Sienna's room, a welcome home dinner that smelled like comfort itself. Mr. Mason, Rosa embraced him with maternal warmth before turning to Sienna and the boys. And you must be the family I've heard so much about. Welcome home. The boys explored with boundless energy, racing from room to room, marveling at the stone fireplace and the view of horses grazing in distant pastures. This was space like they'd never experienced, room to run and shout and be completely, wildly free. Can we ride the horses tomorrow? Ethan asked, his usual shyness forgotten in the face of such possibilities. We'll see, Sienna said automatically, but Mason caught the wonder in her voice as she watched her sons claim their new territory. That night, after the boys were finally asleep in their new bedroom, sharing a bunk bed because they'd never slept apart, Mason found Sienna on the back deck, staring out at stars that seemed close enough to touch. Second thoughts? He asked softly. No. She turned to him with something like peace in her expression. No second thoughts. Just adjustment. This morning I was fighting for custody in an Atlanta courtroom. Tonight, I'm watching Wyoming stars from a ranch that's bigger than the entire neighborhood where I grew up. It's a lot. It's everything. The admission came soft and wondering. Everything I never dared to want for them. Space to grow, safety to be children, a father who... She stopped, color rising in her cheeks. A father who what? A father who loves them already. I can see it, Mason. The way you look at them, the way you listen when they talk. You're already their daddy in every way that matters. The words hit him like benediction and promise combined. I want to be the man they need, the man you need. She moved closer, close enough that he could smell her familiar perfume, see the gold flecks in her dark eyes. The man I married is still in there somewhere, isn't he? Under all the walls and armor, and yes, the admission came rough with honesty. He's still here, buried deep, but still here. When she kissed him, it was soft and tentative, testing waters that had been poisoned by years of hurt and separation. But underneath the caution was something else, recognition, hope, the faint stirring of what they'd once been to each other. We have time, she whispered against his lips. Time to figure this out, time to heal, time to... Her phone buzzed with an incoming text. Unknown number, but the message made her blood freeze. Beautiful ranch. Beautiful family. Enjoy it while you can. Attached was a photo taken from the tree line beyond the house. Mason and Sienna on the deck, the boys' bedroom window glowing with soft light above them. Derek had found them. As they watched the boys sleep through their bedroom window, Eli's arm thrown protectively over Ethan's shoulder, another text arrived. You can't run forever. What's mine stays mine. But this time, Derek had made a crucial miscalculation. This wasn't Atlanta, where he controlled everything. This was Wyoming, Mason's territory, Mason's rules. And there was nowhere on earth more dangerous than a father protecting his sons on his own land. She fell in love with Wyoming's endless sky, but danger followed them across state lines like storm clouds on the horizon. The ranch house glowed golden in the morning light, coffee steaming on the wraparound porch while twin boys raced through sprinkler water, their laughter echoing off mountains that had stood witness to love's victory over fear. Sienna watched from the kitchen window as Mason taught Eli and Ethan to saddle a gentle mare named Buttercup, his patience endless as small hands fumbled with leather straps and buckles. This was the man she'd married, kind, teaching, making ordinary moments feel magical. They're naturals, Rosa commented, joining her at the window with a warm smile. Just like their daddy was at that age. Mason grew up here, from age 12, when his mother brought him here to escape his father's drinking. Rosa's voice car. Sienna absorbed this glimpse into Mason's past, understanding better how he'd survived betrayal and loss. The ranch wasn't just his business, it was his salvation. And now he brings his own family home to heal. Rosa patted Sienna's shoulder with maternal warmth. The circle continues. Through the window, they watched Eli successfully mount Buttercup with Mason's steady hands guiding him, while Ethan clapped from the fence rail. Pure joy radiated from both boys, the kind of happiness that comes from feeling safe enough to be completely yourself. Mama, Mama, look! Eli's shout carried across the yard as he guided Buttercup in a careful circle. I'm a real cowboy. I see you, baby. Sienna called back, her heart swelling with gratitude, so intense it felt like prayer. This was what she'd dreamed of during those long nights in Atlanta. Her sons having space to run and grow, a father who delighted in their discoveries, a home that felt like sanctuary instead of hiding place. But even as she embraced the morning's peace, security cameras tracked movement along the ranch's perimeter, and Mason's ranch hands carried more than work tools in their trucks. Derek's threat hung over their happiness like smoke on the horizon. After lunch, while the boys napped in their new bedroom, Mason showed Sienna the security measures he'd installed. Motion sensors along the access roads, cameras at every entrance, panic buttons in the main rooms of the house. Is all this really necessary? She asked, though she already knew the answer. Derek flew to Wyoming yesterday. Mason's voice carried grim certainty. He's staying at a hotel in Jackson, 2 hours south. My contact at the sheriff's department confirmed it. Sienna's stomach clenched. He followed us here. He was always going to follow us. But this time, we're ready for him. Mason led her to his office, where monitors showed feeds from a dozen cameras. The ranch sprawled across the screens. Pastures and barns, access roads and fence lines, all under electronic watch. I've got 6 ranch hands living on the property now, all former military, all trained for more than cattle work. His finger traced the screen, showing the main gate. Nothing gets onto this ranch without us knowing about it. Have you ever found a place that felt like home immediately? Where your soul just said, yes, this is it? Share that feeling with me in the comments, because even paradise can't keep all the devils away. That evening, they established their first family routine. Dinner around the big kitchen table, the boys chattering about horses and asking endless questions about ranch life. Bath time with more splashing than washing, bedtime stories that turn into tickle fights, and finally, blessedly, silence as exhaustion claimed 2 little bodies. They're happy, Sienna observed as she and Mason stood in the doorway watching their son sleep. Happier than I've seen them since. Well, maybe ever. They feel safe. Mason's arm came around her waist, natural as breathing. Children know when the adults in their lives are pretending everything's okay versus when everything actually is okay. Is everything okay? The question carried deeper meaning than the surface words. Mason turned to face her in the darkened hallway, his eyes serious. It will be. Whatever Derek's planning, whatever his next move, we'll handle it together this time. Together. The word carried promise and possibility, the chance to be partners instead of adversaries, to build instead of break. When he kissed her goodnight at her bedroom door, it was soft and sweet and full of patience. No pressure, no demands, just a gentle rekindling of what they'd once been to each other. Sleep well, he whispered against her forehead. Tomorrow the boys want to see the baby calves. Sienna was almost asleep when her phone buzzed with another text. Derek's number this time, no longer hiding behind unknown contacts. Sweet dreams, beautiful. Enjoy the fantasy while it lasts. But for the first time since Derek had re-entered their lives, the threat felt empty. They weren't hiding anymore. They weren't running. They were home, protected by mountains and man-made security, and something even more powerful, the determination of parents protecting their children. Let Derek come. This time, they'd be ready. Outside her window, Wyoming wind whispered through pine trees while motion sensors kept electronic watch. Somewhere in the darkness, Derek was planning his next move. But here in this house, surrounded by love and laughter and the promise of tomorrow's adventures, Sienna finally understood what safety felt like. As she drifted towards sleep, movement outside the window caught her eye, a figure in the tree line, watching the house. Derek had found them, just as Mason predicted. But this time, instead of fear, she felt something else entirely. The fierce protectiveness of a mother who'd found her strength. Let him watch. Let him plan. Let him try. He was about to discover what happened when you threatened a family that had finally found its way home. He came to Wyoming like a plague, bringing city violence to country peace, but he underestimated what a father would do to protect his sons. The Wyoming wind carried dust and danger as Derek emerged from the barn where he'd been hiding, his city clothes making him look like a predator displaced, desperate and deadly. It was Tuesday morning, just after sunrise. Mason had been checking the horses when he spotted movement in his peripheral vision. Derek stood 50 yards away, no longer hiding, no longer playing games. Just a man pushed past reason by obsession and rage. "Hello, old friend." Derek's voice carried across the morning air, artificially calm. "Beautiful place you have here. Perfect for raising children." Mason's hand moved instinctively toward the rifle mounted on his ATV. But Derek held up both hands in mock surrender. "No need for weapons. Mason, we're just talking. There's nothing to talk about." Mason's voice stayed level, but every muscle in his body coiled for action. "You lost, Derek. In court, in Atlanta, in every way that matters. It's over. Over." Derek laughed, the sound sharp and broken in a morning stillness. "It's never over. Not when someone takes what belongs to me. Sienna and those boys never belonged to you, didn't they?" Derek stepped closer, his composure finally cracking completely. "I saved her, Mason. When you abandoned her, when your reputation was in ruins, when she was pregnant and scared. I was there. I gave her everything. You gave her a cage. I gave her love. The shout echoed off the mountains, raw with years of frustrated obsession. Real love, not your selfish version that destroys everything it touches. Mason calculated distances, escape routes, ways to keep Derek away from the house where Sienna and the boys were having breakfast. Every second of this conversation was another second for his family to get to safety. You don't know what love is, Mason said quietly. Love doesn't control. Love doesn't manipulate. Love doesn't stalk and threaten. And your version of love does what? Abandons a pregnant woman, builds an empire on other people's destruction, turns into a monster when things get difficult. Derek's eyes glittered with malicious satisfaction. Tell me, Mason, what did Sienna see when she looked at you after the accusations? The gentleman she married, or the cold bastard you became? The words hit their target because Derek was right about one thing. Mason had become someone Sienna couldn't recognize. Someone who solved problems through intimidation and violence. But those boys sleeping in the house behind him had changed everything. When someone threatens your family, how far would you go to protect them? What lines would you cross for the people you love most? Share your thoughts below, because what happened next would determine whether this family survived. She saw a man who lost his way, Mason admitted, but she also saw a man willing to find it again for his sons. Your sons. Derek pulled a gun from his jacket, the morning sun glinting off metal. Are you sure about that, Mason? DNA tests can be so unreliable. The weapon changed everything. This wasn't just obsession anymore. This was desperation armed and dangerous. You're not walking away from this, Derek. Mason's voice dropped to deadly calm. Not with my family. Not with my children. Those children belong with someone who can provide stability, security, love without violence. Derek's hand shook slightly as he aimed the gun. I've been patient, Mason, but patience has limits. Behind Derek, movement caught Mason's eye. Sienna appeared at the kitchen window, coffee mug frozen halfway to her lips as she saw the confrontation unfolding in the yard. Their eyes met across 50 yards of morning air, and Mason saw the exact moment she understood the threat. Saw her disappear from a window, hopefully to call 911 and get the boys somewhere safe. She's calling the police, Mason said, buying time. Let her call. By the time they arrive from town, this will be finished. Derek's voice carried the flat certainty of a man who'd crossed his final line. You're going to sign custody papers, Mason. You're going to disappear from their lives permanently. And if I refuse? Derek's smile held no warmth. Then there will be a tragic accident. A violent ex-husband who couldn't accept losing his family, who became dangerous, unstable, who forced me to defend innocent children. The scenario was plausible enough to work. Derek had spent years building his reputation as a stable, caring provider while painting Mason as volatile and dangerous. One more act of violence would cement the narrative perfectly. Except Derek had made one crucial mistake. He'd threatened Mason's sons on Mason's land. You're right about one thing, Mason said, stepping closer despite the gun. I did become someone Sienna couldn't recognize. Someone willing to destroy anything that threatened what I cared about. Stay back. But you know what the difference is between then and now? Another step closer, Mason's voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Then I was protecting my pride, my reputation, my empire. Now I'm protecting my family. Derek's gun hand trembled as Mason closed the distance between them, moving with the calm certainty of a man who'd already accepted the cost of what came next. You don't understand, Derek's voice cracked. I love her. I've always loved her. No. Mason was close enough now to see the desperation and drugs and years of obsession that had hollowed Derek out from the inside. You love the idea of owning her. There's a difference. When Mason moved, it was with the fluid violence of a man who'd learned to fight in oil field bars and corporate boardrooms. Derek's gun discharged once, the bullet going wide as Mason's tackle carried them both to the ground. They rolled in the dirt, fighting for control of the weapon, years of hatred and rivalry exploding into physical combat. Derek was desperate. But Mason was fighting for his children's future. The gun fired again, this time into the air, before Mason finally wrestled it away and pinned Derek face down in the Wyoming dust. "It's over," Mason panted, the gun now aimed at Derek's head. "It's finally over." Sirens wailed in the distance, Sienna's call bringing help faster than expected. But Derek's final words, spoken into the dirt with his face pressed against earth that would never be his, carried one last poison. "You think this ends it? You think killing me solves anything? I've left instructions, Mason, documentation. If anything happens to me, if I disappear or die, or even go to prison for too long, those boys disappear forever. And Sienna? She'll spend the rest of her life wondering where they went." Mason's finger tightened on the trigger, every instinct screaming to end the threat permanently. One bullet would solve everything, remove Derek from their lives forever. But as police cars roared up the ranch's access road, kicking up clouds of dust and salvation, Mason made a different choice. He stepped back, keeping the gun trained on Derek but not pulling the trigger. Because the man Sienna had fallen in love with, the man his sons needed as a father, wouldn't become a killer to solve his problems. Even when killing would be easier than living with the consequences of mercy. As Derek was loaded into the police car, his final words echoed across the ranch. "This isn't over, Mason. It's never over." But Mason's response, spoken with deadly calm as he watched his enemy disappear behind steel and glass, ended the threat forever. "Yes, it is. Because sometimes the strongest choice isn't violence. It's the discipline to choose something better." Peace felt foreign after years of running, but love has a way of teaching broken hearts how to trust safety again. Summer mornings on the ranch painted the world gold. Coffee steaming on the porch while twin boys raced through sprinkler water, their laughter echoing off mountains that had stood witness to love's victory over fear. 3 months had passed since Derek's arrest. 3 months of Derek in a federal prison awaiting trial on charges of stalking, harassment, illegal surveillance, and attempted kidnapping. 3 months of Sienna and the boys learning what normal felt like. "Daddy, watch this," Eli called from the corral where he was attempting to rope a practice dummy. His throw went wide, but his determination never wavered. "Good try, buddy. Remember what I taught you about your grip." Mason adjusted Eli's small hands on the rope, patient as summer rain. From the porch swing, Sienna watched her family with something approaching wonder. This was the life she dreamed of during those desperate years in Atlanta. Her sons having a father who delighted in teaching them, who had time for their endless questions and boundless energy. "Mrs. Sienna," Rosa joined her on the porch with fresh lemonade. "You look peaceful today." "I feel peaceful." The admission still surprised her. For the first time in, maybe ever. "Good. Peace looks beautiful on you." It was true. The constant tension she'd carried for years had finally released its grip on her shoulders. She slept through the night now, without checking locks 3 times. She laughed at the boys' silly jokes without scanning exits. She was learning to live instead of just survive. "Mama!" Ethan ran up to the porch, his quieter nature giving way to excitement. "Daddy said we can help with the cattle drive next week. Real cowboys, just like in the movies." "If you're sure you're ready for that much responsibility," Sienna said with mock seriousness. "We're ready," both boys chorused, and their absolute confidence in their own capabilities made her heart swell. After surviving something traumatic, how do you learn to trust good things again? How do you embrace happiness when you're used to looking over your shoulder? Tell me below, because healing isn't linear and some days are harder than others. That evening, after the boys were finally asleep, stories read, teeth brushed, prayers said, and one last drink of water negotiated, Mason found Sienna in the kitchen, staring out at Wyoming stars. "Second thoughts?" he asked, the same question he'd posed that first night. "Never." She turned to face him, her smile warm and unguarded. "But I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. Keep expecting something to go wrong." "Nothing's going wrong." He moved closer, close enough to touch if either of them was brave enough. "Derek's in prison. The boys are thriving. You're safe." "We're safe," she corrected softly. "All of us together." The correction felt significant, an acknowledgement that they were becoming a unit again instead of two broken people trying to co-parent from opposite sides of old wounds. Sienna, her name on his lips, carried 4 years of regret and hope combined. I know we're taking this slow, rebuilding trust, but I need you to know what? I never stopped loving you. The admission came rough with honesty. Even when I hated you for leaving, even when I convinced myself I was better off alone, I never stopped loving you. She studied his face in the kitchen light, seeing the man she'd married alongside the harder edges life had carved into him. Both versions were Mason. Both versions were hers. I never stopped loving you either, she whispered. That was the problem. Loving you while being afraid of you. Wanting you while needing to protect the boys from what you'd become. And now, she reached up to trace the line of his jaw, her touch soft and wondering. Now I see the man I married learning to be the father our sons need. And I think maybe we can have everything we lost, everything we threw away. When he kissed her, it was with 4 years of separation and longing compressed into a single moment of connection. Her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, while his arms came around her waist like he'd never let her go again. I want to marry you again, he whispered against her lips. Here on the ranch, with the boys as our witnesses. I want to do it right this time. Again, laughter bubbled up from somewhere deep in her chest. We're still married, Mason Voss. I never filed divorce papers. Neither did I. His grin was boyish and beautiful. Guess we'll have to settle for renewing our vows. I guess we will. They stood in the kitchen, holding each other and planning a future that felt possible for the first time in years. Outside, Wyoming wind whispered through pine trees while their son slept safely upstairs. Healing had begun, not just for their marriage, but for all the broken places Derek's obsession had carved into their lives. But as they kissed goodnight at Sienna's bedroom door, still taking things slowly, still rebuilding trust, neither noticed the letter that had arrived in the day's mail. From Derek's prison lawyer, containing one final revelation that would shake their newfound peace to its foundation. The woman who once hid her pregnancy in fear now announced her baby with joy, surrounded by love that had conquered every obstacle. The ranch chapel overflowed with wildflowers and witnesses as Sienna walked down an aisle lined with sage and sweetgrass, her twins leading the way as ring bearers toward the man who'd fought hell itself to claim his family. 6 months had passed since Derek's final arrest. 6 months of family dinners and bedtime stories, of learning to trust happiness, of remembering how to be married to each other. Today they would make it official again, not because law required it, but because love demanded celebration. Mama looks like a princess, Eli whispered loudly to his brother as they scattered flower petals with more enthusiasm than precision. A pretty princess, Ethan agreed, his usual shyness forgotten in the joy of the moment. Sienna wore the same dress she'd worn to their first wedding 7 years ago, altered slightly to accommodate the changes motherhood had brought to her body. But her smile was entirely new, radiant with the kind of happiness that comes from surviving the worst and choosing to believe in the best. Mason waited at the altar looking like he'd been struck by lightning, his eyes never leaving her face as she moved toward him through morning sunlight and the scent of Wyoming wildflowers. Dearly beloved, Pastor Williams began, his voice carrying across the small chapel to the gathered crowd of ranch hands, neighbors, and chosen family who'd supported them through the hardest months. Have you ever experienced a love that felt worth fighting for? That survived everything thrown at it and came out stronger? Share your victory story below, because some love stories are worth celebrating. Do you, Mason Voss, take Sienna to be your wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, as long as you both shall live? Edo. Mason's voice carried the weight of promise and redemption. Again, always, forever. Do you, Sienna Williams Voss, take Mason to be your husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, as long as you both shall live? Edo. Her voice stayed steady despite the tears of joy streaming down her cheeks. I choose you, Mason. I choose us. I choose this beautiful, complicated, worth everything love. When they kissed, sealing vows renewed and promises reborn, the chapel erupted in cheers and applause. But for Mason and Sienna, the world narrowed to just them. Two people who'd lost each other and found their way back, who'd chosen love over fear, hope over hurt. I now pronounce you husband and wife. Again, Pastor Williams grinned at the couple he'd watched fall apart and build back stronger. You may kiss your bride. Again, the reception on the ranch lawn stretched into evening. Fairy lights strung between trees, while a local band played country songs that made couples sway closer together. Eli and Ethan raced between tables with other ranch children, their laughter mixing with music and conversation and the sound of love being celebrated. Happy? Mason asked as they swayed together during their first dance, officially married for the second time to the same person. Happier than I ever imagined possible. Sienna rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Even during our worst days in Atlanta, even when I was so scared I couldn't think straight, I never dared hope for this. For what? For all of it. The boys having a father who adores them, a home that feels safe, a husband who sees me as a partner instead of a problem to solve. She lifted her head to meet his eyes, for the chance to be ridiculously, completely happy. Around them, their community celebrated. Rosa dancing with one of the ranch hands, the boys teaching other children how to two-step, neighbors and friends who become family sharing food and laughter under Wyoming stars. There's something I need to tell you, Sienna said as the song ended, her voice carrying nervous excitement. What? She took his hand and placed it over her still flat stomach, where life was just beginning to stir. I'm pregnant, Mason. We're having another baby. The world stopped. Music continued. People kept dancing, but Mason's entire existence narrowed to this moment. This woman, this miracle of new life created by love instead of desperation. Another baby? His voice came out wondering, awestruck. Due in March. I found out yesterday, but I wanted to wait until today to tell you. Our wedding day felt like the perfect time for new beginnings. He lifted her off her feet, spinning her around while she laughed with pure joy. Their third child, conceived in love and hope instead of the fear and control that had marked Derek's influence on their lives. I love you, he whispered against her ear as he set her down gently. I love you and our boys, and this baby, and this life we're building together. I love you too. All of you. All of this. She gestured toward their celebration, their family, their future. Even the hard parts that taught us how to appreciate the good parts. As they danced under stars and fairy lights, surrounded by the laughter of their sons and the warmth of community, neither could have imagined the letter waiting in Mason's office. Derek's final revelation that would test their newfound happiness one last time. But for tonight, they celebrated. They danced and laughed and planned the future with the confidence of people who'd survived the worst and chosen to believe in the best. Love had won, family had won, hope had won, and sometimes that's enough to build a lifetime on. Even from the grave, Derek had one last secret that would either destroy their happiness or set them free forever. The lawyer's office in Cheyenne felt worlds away from ranch celebrations and family joy as Derek's final confession played on audio, his voice admitting to crimes that had haunted their marriage for years. I, Derek Kane, being of sound mind and facing significant prison time, hereby confess to the following criminal acts committed between 2018 and 2024. Mason's jaw clenched as Derek's voice filled the sterile office, detailing years of manipulation, fraud, and calculated destruction. Beside him, Sienna sat perfectly still, absorbing the magnitude of Derek's obsession with their lives. I fabricated the sexual assault allegations against Mason Voss in 2020, bribing witnesses and falsifying evidence to destroy his marriage to Sienna Williams. The confession continued for 30 minutes, Derek's voice clinical and detached as he detailed bribing witnesses, manipulating evidence, creating false identities, embezzling funds from multiple companies to support his elaborate schemes. Why now? Mason asked the lawyer when the recording ended. Why confess everything? Terminal cancer. The lawyer replied matter-of-factly. Mr. Kane died in federal prison 3 days ago. This confession was part of his estate planning, a final attempt to clear his conscience before death. 3 days ago, while they've been planning their vow renewal, dancing with their sons, celebrating their future, Derek had been dying alone in a prison cell, his obsession finally consuming him completely. There's more, the lawyer continued, sliding documents across his desk. Financial records showing the full extent of his embezzlement. Over $8 million stolen from various companies and investments, much of it used to fund the surveillance and manipulation of your family. Sienna stared at the numbers, trying to comprehend the scope of Derek's obsession. $8 million? He spent nearly $2 million creating and maintaining your false identity alone. Another $3 million on surveillance, private investigators, legal fees. The remaining funds were invested in shell companies designed to control every aspect of your life in Atlanta. When the truth finally comes out, does it heal old wounds or just remind you how much time was wasted on lies? How do you move forward after injustice? Share your thoughts, because what they discovered next would change everything. What happens to the money now? Mason asked, though he already suspected the answer. It reverts to his victims. In this case, primarily your family and the companies he defrauded. The lawyer pulled out another set of documents. After legal fees and restitution, you're looking at approximately $6 million in recovered assets. $6 million. Enough to secure their children's futures, expand the ranch, fund the culinary school Sienna had always dreamed of opening. Money built on obsession and crime, but now available for healing and hope. I don't want it, Sienna said suddenly. Not a penny of his blood money. Sienna, no, my son. That money represents years of manipulation and control. Taking it feels like letting him win, even from the grave. Mason understood her revulsion, but his practical mind saw opportunities beyond personal feelings. What if we use it for good? Set up foundations, scholarships, programs to help other families who've been stalked or manipulated. The lawyer nodded approvingly. Many victims choose that path, transform the source of their trauma into a force for healing. Sienna considered this, her expression slowly shifting from revulsion to possibility. A foundation for women escaping controlling relationships? Legal aid for custody battles? The Sienna Voss Foundation for Family Justice? Mason suggested gently. Your name, your vision, your chance to make sure Derek's crimes create something beautiful instead of just leaving scars. For the first time since entering the lawyer's office, Sienna smiled. I like that, taking his weapon and turning it into our shield. The paperwork took hours, transferring assets, establishing the foundation, filing final legal documents that would close Derek's chapter in their lives forever. By the time they left Cheyenne, the sun was setting over Wyoming mountains, painting the sky in shades of redemption. It's really over, isn't it? Sienna asked as they drove home to their sons, their ranch, their life. It's really over. Mason reached across to take her hand, their wedding rings catching the last light of day. Derek's dead, his schemes are exposed, and we have the resources to help other families avoid what we went through. And our baby will be born into a world free of his influence. Their baby, due in March, conceived in love and hope instead of fear and desperation. A child who would know only the good parts of their story, who would grow up surrounded by love instead of secrets. As they pulled into the ranch driveway, they could see warm light spilling from the kitchen windows where Rosa was helping Eli and Ethan with their homework. Home, family, safety, everything Derek had tried to destroy, now stronger for having survived his assault. What do you think he'd say if he could see us now? Sienna wondered as they sat in the truck, reluctant to break the peaceful moment. I think he'd finally understand the difference between love and obsession. Mason's voice carried forgiveness he never thought he'd feel. Between building someone up and tearing them down. Do you forgive him? The question hung between them, complicated and necessary. Mason considered it seriously, weighing years of anger against the peace of resolution. I forgive him for being sick, he said finally, for being so broken that he couldn't see love as anything but possession. But I'll never forgive him for what he put you and the boys through. I forgive him. Sienna's admission surprised them both. Not because he deserves it, but because holding on to that anger would poison the happiness we've built. I want our children to see that love is stronger than hate, that healing is possible even after the worst betrayal. They sat in comfortable silence, processing the end of a chapter that had defined too much of their lives. Tomorrow they would tell the boys that the bad man who'd scared them was gone forever. Tomorrow they would start planning the foundation that would transform Derek's crimes into hope for other families. But tonight, they would simply be grateful. For each other, for their sons, for the baby growing safely in Sienna's womb, for the chance to build something beautiful from the ashes of what Derek had tried to destroy. As they walked toward the house where their children waited, Mason wrapped his arm around his wife, holding close the woman who'd taught him that some things are worth fighting for, worth forgiving for, worth building a lifetime around. Derek's story was over. Theirs was just beginning. The woman who once offered her body to save her mother now offered her heart to build a dynasty, not of wealth, but of love that would outlast generations. The ranch house echoed with chaos and joy. Twin 8-year-olds arguing over chores while their baby sister giggled in her high chair, syrup-sticky fingers reaching for everything. This was the life Mason never dreamed he deserved and Sienna never imagined possible. 5 years had passed since Derek's death. 5 years of building the family and foundation they dreamed of during their darkest days. The Sienna Voss Foundation had helped over 300 families escape controlling relationships, funded legal aid for countless custody battles, and provided safe housing for women starting over. "Daddy, Luna's making a mess again." Eli called from the kitchen table, where he was attempting homework while his little sister conducted a science experiment with her breakfast. "She's exploring," Mason defended his daughter as he wiped oatmeal from her dark curls. "Scientists have to start somewhere." Luna Marie Voss had arrived on a snowy March morning, healthy and perfect and absolutely determined to keep up with her big brothers from day one. Now 3 years old, she ruled the ranch with tiny fists and a smile that could melt Wyoming winters. "Dada." Luna reached sticky hands toward Mason, demanding attention with the confidence of a child who'd never doubted she was loved completely. "Yes, princess. Daddy sees you making art with your breakfast." From the doorway, Sienna watched her family with the kind of contentment that comes from surviving the worst and choosing to build something better. The community college had offered her a permanent position as head of the culinary program, but she declined to focus on the foundation and ranch life. Some mornings she still woke expecting danger, old habits dying hard. But then she'd hear Mason making breakfast with the kids, hear their laughter echoing through rooms that had become home instead of hiding place, and remember that some stories really do have happy endings. So what would you do if someone saw your worth before you believed in it yourself? Would you fight for love even when it seemed impossible? Comment below with what you would have done in their shoes. Because this family's journey proves that healing is possible even after the deepest betrayal. "Mama, can we ride to the creek today?" Ethan asked, looking up from his math homework with hopeful eyes. "I want to show Luna the baby ducks." "If you finish your homework and help with morning chores," Sienna negotiated. The same patient authority she'd learned as a single mother now applied to a house full of children who tested boundaries with loving determination. "Deal," both boys chorused, suddenly motivated by the promise of adventure. Later that morning, as they saddled horses for the ride to the creek, Mason caught Sienna's hand and pulled her close. "Happy anniversary," he whispered against her ear. "Our wedding anniversary isn't until next month," she laughed. "Anniversary of the day I found you in that restaurant. 8 years ago today." His voice carried wonder that time hadn't diminished. 8 years since I walked into Mama Ruby's and discovered I was a father. 8 years. It felt like a lifetime and an instant simultaneously. So much pain between then and now, but also so much growth, so much healing, so much love built on the foundation of what they'd lost and found again. "Best day of my life," she said, meaning it completely, even with all the chaos that followed. especially because of the chaos that followed. Mason's grin was boyish and beautiful. Chaos brought us home to each other. They mounted their horses and rode toward the creek. Luna secured in a special saddle in front of Mason while the boys raced ahead on their ponies, whooping like the cowboys they'd become. The Wyoming sky stretched endless and blue above them, mountains standing witness to this ordinary miracle of family happiness. At the creek, they spread blankets for a picnic while Luna toddled after ducklings with more enthusiasm than coordination. Eli and Ethan skipped stones and told elaborate stories about the fish they were definitely going to catch someday. "Tell us the story again," Ethan asked as they settled for lunch, his request as predictable as sunrise. "Which story?" Sienna asked, though she already knew. "The story about how you and Daddy found each other again, and how we got Luna, and how the bad man went away forever." It had become family legend, the story of how their parents fought their way back to each other. Sanitized for young ears, focused on love, conquering fear rather than the darker details they'd understand when they were older. "Once upon a time," Mason began, "there was a beautiful mama who loved her twin boys so much she was willing to do anything to keep them safe. The story always ended the same way, and they all lived happily ever after in the most beautiful place in the world, surrounded by love that was stronger than any fear. Will we really live happily ever after?" Luna asked with 3-year-old seriousness. "We already are, princess," Sienna assured her daughter. "This is what happily ever after looks like. Family dinners and horseback rides and bedtime stories, and people who love you no matter what." As afternoon stretched toward evening, they packed up their picnic and rode home through golden light that made the ranch look like something from a fairy tale. Luna fell asleep against Mason's chest while the boys chattered about their plans for tomorrow's adventures. That night, after bats and stories and the eternal negotiation for just one more glass of water, Mason and Sienna stood on their back deck watching stars emerge over Wyoming sky. "Any regrets?" he asked, the same question he'd posed years ago. "None." Her answer came swift and certain. "Even the hard parts led us here." Here was more than geography. It was the sound of their children's laughter echoing through rooms that had become home. It was the foundation that turned their trauma into hope for other families. It was the ranch that provided space for healing and growth. It was the love that had survived everything thrown at it and emerged stronger. "I love you, Sienna Voss." Mason's voice carried 8 years of separation and reunion, loss and recovery, fear and hope. "I love you and our babies and this life we've built together. I love you too." She turned in his arms, seeing the man she'd married alongside all the ways he'd grown and changed. "All of you, all of this, even the scars that taught us how strong we could be." When he kissed her, it tasted like promise and permanence, like the kind of love that writes itself across generations. Behind them, their house glowed with warm light while their children slept safely in beds that had never known fear. The story that began with desperation in an Atlanta restaurant had become something beautiful, a family that chose love over fear, healing over hatred, hope over hurt. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories about love conquering impossible odds. Tell me in the comments which moment made you believe in second chances. And remember, sometimes the family you fight for becomes the legacy you leave behind. As Wyoming's sunset painted their world gold, Mason pulled his wife close while somewhere in the house their children dreamed of tomorrow's adventures. Love hadn't rescued them from their lives. It had revealed the strength that was there all along. And in the end, that made all the difference.